Hello, everybody, and welcome back to episode 22 of the On Deck podcast. I'm your host, Roberto, and today we're going to be talking Acuna coming back to the Braves. We're going to be talking about an unfortunate IL stint for Bregman and what that means for a certain Red Sox prospect. We're gonna talk about PCA for a little bit and give him his flowers for a little bit, and then we have some unfortunate news coming from the Pittsburgh Pirates organization. So all that on today's episode. So jumping right into things, the Atlanta Braves got a big boost to their lineup, and that is the return of Ronald Acuna Jr. He's now back in the lineup after, some rehab games, after, recovering from an ACL injury that he suffered last year. And I kind of felt bad for the guy, especially the way that it happened, especially after the season that he had prior, winning the MVP and going 40-70, which is still crazy to think about. But you can obviously tell last year that something wasn't right with him, and it might have been that knee was nagging him for a little bit, and then it just eventually gave out on the base paths. But just to see him back in that lineup for an Atlanta Braves that's playing a lot better baseball as of the last few weeks. They're starting to make, the comeback that we all expected the Braves to make, playing better baseball and being the Braves that we thought they should have been from the beginning of the season. So it's good to see that. But what an electric return for Acuna. First at bat, first pitch he sees, I was watching, and they didn't even have time to, fully put the score bug at the bottom of the screen, and Acuna's smashing one into the outfield and over the wall for a leadoff home run, which is, I think, just one of the coolest moments because he's put in a lot of work to come back, and he wasn't rushing that process. And I think because the Braves were playing a better brand of baseball these last few weeks, I think that the Braves kind of said, you know what, take your time. Like, we don't need to rush you to come back. We're obviously wanting you to come back into this lineup, but we're not playing the first 2 weeks baseball rather than what we've been playing the last 3 weeks of baseball. So, he wasn't rushing, and to see him come back and be the Acuna that we all know, and him playing the outfield and with a cannon of an arm too. He made a nice defensive play in right field, throwing a guy out. Maybe we see, he wasn't always a great outfielder, metrics-wise, but always had a strong arm. So maybe we can see, maybe something in the middle to be not a below-average fielder, but, playable in the outfield, obviously, with that big arm and that great speed. But for me, what I'm curious to see with Acuna back is, how does he look on the bases? Does he still have that, that burst of speed that he probably lost from that ACL surgery? But with these remaining games, and you might not see it right away, but I want to see at the end of the season tally up, how many stolen bases he has, and, kind of look at his caught stealing as well, because I think that could be a big factor to kind of weigh in how that ACL is feeling, because you could get a good jump, but if you're not able to turn and plant that knee, it's a fraction of a second that you may not think about stealing a base, but in that moment, it's gonna be you being safe and getting a hand in under the tag, or you being thrown out by half a step or something like that. So I'm kind of curious to see how, his end of the year stats look, but man, it's good to see him hitting leadoff bombs, and, the bat flip, the celebration, I think was absolutely electric. But now moving on to a Bregman injury, unfortunate for the Red Sox, because this guy was, he was putting up great numbers, was definitely performing to what we all thought he would, especially in Fenway, peppering that monster with doubles galore. But unfortunately, Bregman has hit the IL with a left quad strain, and this is, a significant injury because, a quad is a pretty big muscle in the legs, and, for a guy that does a lot of moving at third base and is still, pretty athletic over there at the hot corner, and with those doubles, you're going to be running around quite a bit. So Alex Cora had said during the press conference after this game when he was pulled that it's a pretty significant injury, and unfortunately for Bregman, this is probably going to be like a four. I'm expecting like a 4 to 6 week IL stint. I know he got originally put onto the 10-day IL, just to receive an MRI and kind of think of what move we need to make. But on the positive side of this, they were able to call up a certain prospect to play in the infield, and I think a lot of people surprised they called up Marcelo Meyer. And this is, one of their top prospects, obviously, part of that trio of him, Roman Anthony, and Christian Campbell. So it's cool to see that the Red Sox, have their prospects in mind, and once the opportunity is there, maybe not with Roman Anthony and kind of how everything would fit positionally with, Casas and Devers and all that foolery that was going on a couple weeks ago. But it's good to see that they're calling up their prospects and giving them an opportunity to play. I think here with Bregman going down and Meyer going to be slotting into third base for quite a bit, I think this is unfortunate, but a great opportunity to see what he can do at the major league level. Obviously, he doesn't have anything to prove anymore at the AAA level. He was absolutely tearing it up. And now we get to see how he phases in the bright lights and kind of the future of the Red Sox, possibly with that amazing outfield. And you could slot Roman in there and for Rafaela, maybe, who knows, but it'll be interesting to see how they play this infield. That's something I'm gonna be paying attention for, because Marcelo Meyer, he's played some shortstop, came up and drafted, was a shortstop. But as of a couple weeks ago, with, Casas going down, we saw him, move over to second base, and we did see Christian Campbell learning a bit of first base. So it's kind of interesting to me, because we all know that Devers is going to be the DH for the year, and he's not moving. But it could be an interesting move if they do put Devers at third base. His quote-unquote natural position could put Marcelo Meyer at second, and you have Christian Campbell learning yet another new position, that is first base, and kind of open that DH opportunity. I know they won't do it, but it's just something that you can kind of float in the air and kind of dream about if you're a Red Sox fan. But on the flip side, you do have still Masataka Yoshida that would be clogging up that DH role once he comes back from his shoulder injury. But man, I just wish there was some kind of way that they're able to call up Roman Anthony, because me personally, I would love to see that outfield, all sweet swinging lefties in that outfield with Duran, Roman Anthony, and Wilyer Abreu. I think that outfield could be locks, for the next 5-6 years easily. And, all those guys are relatively young, and Jarren Duran is showing how he's, super electric. We saw that last year. Wilyer Abreu, we saw him last year as well. He put up a great rookie season, and we've seen flashes of it this year. And then with Roman, he's just waiting for his turn in AAA. But I'm glad to see that Marcelo Meyer did get called up. I just also realized that this lineup, outside of, Casas going down, this lineup has a lot of lefties. I'm just now taking that in, but whatever works for Boston, it's we could see, a better brand of baseball coming, because that's another team. All the teams in the AL East outside of my New York Yankees are severely underperforming. At one point, I was looking at the standings a few days ago, all the teams were under .500 except for the Yankees. And this comes to me as a surprise, especially, the Orioles. The Blue Jays are, they're I would expect them to be in the hovering around 500. Same with the Rays, maybe a couple games under 500, but the Orioles and Red Sox are severely underperforming in this division. So maybe this is the boost of, that young blood coming in and kind of raising the energy levels and shifting the better brand of baseball for this team. But the Red Sox this was a lineup that I personally liked coming into the season. And, it's got a hole at first base. And I think with these young guys, I know you don't want to necessarily move them around like what they're doing with Christian Campbell, having them learn some outfield while still, playing a little bit of second base here and there. But I think with the flexibility these younger guys give you, I think it's an opportunity to try to get those like a Roman Anthony in there somehow. Just somehow. Red Sox. They definitely could make this work for, however long Bregman is out for. And I think with this they're getting some pitchers back too. I know Walker Buehler was making his way back from an injury, made a start a few days ago against the Red Sox. But, this is a team that I think can still be dangerous in the AL. At this point, they're probably a lock for second place. But, I'm glad to see that they're calling up their young guys, Marcelo Meyer, and this is quite a runway that he gets. I'm not sure that he had this in mind as, his welcome to the majors kind of moment. But, if I'm him, I'm taking this opportunity and running as far with it as I can, kind of make them to force the Red Sox into a decision between him and maybe a Nick Sogard or an Abraham Toro being sent down and, moving pieces around to have Marcelo stay up if he's making this impact that, I think he can make at the major league level. So again, I'm glad for Marcelo Meyer getting called up and glad to see that, he's going to be making an impact for this Red Sox team. Now, speaking of guys making an impact, we got to talk about Pete Crow Armstrong here for a second because this guy is absolutely going insane right now. This is a guy that last year was just a glove first kind of center fielder, and you kind of got what you got on the offensive side, but you weren't really making this guy a main focus in your attack when you're playing the Cubs and game planning for how am I going to attack Pete Crow Armstrong and getting him out. This year, oh my goodness, has a flip been switched. At the time of recording, he's hitting 283, 313, 580 for an OPS of 894 and a WRC plus of 145. 145. And last year, this was a guy sitting at an 87 WRC plus last year. And, this wasn't great, but he did show signs in, the later stages of the season that kind of give you some hope. But this year has been a whole different story. He's still playing that Gold Glove defense, but now we see him being, a top 5 in home runs and stolen bases. And I don't think anybody really saw this coming. And this was a guy, who I thought, you stick him at the bottom of your lineup if you're the Cubs and you kind of pray for what you get and kind of lay back on him for the defense because, it's always going to be amazing. But now he's fully putting it together, and man, this lineup with the Cubs was already deep to start the season. But to see PCA producing and being the player that he is now, he's put himself into, the MVP running. I think, I mean, if Ohtani didn't exist, I think he'd be a top 3 candidate in the National League. But, until Ohtani, is done playing, I think this MVP award is basically his to lose every year. But PCA, if you don't really see many players playing this good Gold Glove defense and producing these kind of numbers at the plate and being that unique blend of, even I can't even say power and speed because he's hitting 280 right now. So, to see this kind of player kind of blossom this young too, he's still super, super young. I think sky's the limit for this guy, and I bet the Mets are kind of, fighting this trade looking back at it, but man, I love to see PCA just fly around on the bases and fly around in the outfield making diving catches, all these spectacular grabs. His speed is just insane, especially closing speed with, getting to those fly balls in the gap. I think it's just an electric. I'm loving where the game is with these young players. Guys like Corbin Carroll, PCA. We can go back to, quote unquote older guys like Acuna, Tatis, Merrill. The future of the MLB is absolutely in the right hands, and I'm just loving where the game is going with these guys. And to close things out here, we have some unfortunate news from the Pittsburgh Pirates organization. Jared Jones had suffered a sprained UCL earlier in the season, and for quite a while we haven't heard or gotten any updates from them. But unfortunately, this sprained UCL requires some Tommy John surgery, and that unfortunately means that he's going to miss all of 2025. And, hopefully if all goes well in his rehab and, no hiccups, fingers crossed, we see this guy come back post All-Star break in 2026. And, this is sad for Pirates fans because now we kind of get that fantasy of the big four with obviously the best pitcher in the MLB, Paul Skeens, Mitch Keller, Jared Jones, and Bubba Chandler, who they keep stashing up in AAA. We won't be seeing this rotation this year per se, and hopefully if all goes well next year and everybody stays, if they don't trade Mitch Keller this deadline, I think this is obviously a very bright young rotation that I think can run the MLB for quite a while. If these guys, as they get older, they improve and get better every year. But this is quite unfortunate for a guy like Jared Jones, who, last year flashed some really great stuff, had a great fastball, high 90s, had a great slider, was kind of tinkering with that changeup and curveball. And, we saw a sinker every now and then from him. He was learning that near the end of the season and kind of was working with that in spring training. But man, this sucks for him because, I think with him throwing that high velocity, it was kind of like a ticking time bomb until something was bound to go wrong. But, I wish him a speedy recovery, but I think this is the perfect opportunity now for the Pittsburgh Pirates to call up a guy like Bubba Chandler. I know that I just know that the Pirates aren't going to do it. They'll probably find some next position player or some DFA candidate from dumpster diving to come up instead of Bubba Chandler. But this is perfect for perfect opportunity for Chandler. The Pirates aren't going anywhere anytime soon and being competitive. So, and plus the guy's been dominating in AAA, and what left does he have to prove to anybody, really? This is where he's going to make his tinkerings and adjustments are at the major league level. Making sure that he can pick up on tendencies from, seasoned vets or rookies in this sense. But I think this is his time to get called up, and I know that him and Skeens have like that competitive edge towards each other. So I think if you put those guys together, I think they can only help each other really, and help the rest of that pitching staff. I know there isn't anybody really there that excites you other than Skeens, and I think that's the only guy who's having these bringing Pittsburgh Pirates fans to the field, because it's a beautiful ballpark. Honestly, it's one of the nicer all around But yeah, I hope to see Chandler up at some point this year. Fingers crossed. I'm like triple crossing my fingers because I just want to see this guy perform at the major league level. And next year, come the All-Star break, I want to see this dominant four that we could see, run the MLB for some years to come. And yeah, it's an exciting time, possibly for Pirates fans. I know there isn't much to be excited about it in Bucks Nation, but maybe this time next year we could see that hype building back up for a Jared Jones returning into that rotation. But until then, you know what, you guys got Skeens. There's one bright spot. You got O'Neal Cruz hitting the ball like as hard as anybody else in the league. So I guess that's good enough for now. So Pirates fans, let me know if I'm missing anything for you guys to get hype about. But and with that being said, I think that's going to conclude it for today's episode. I appreciate each and every one of you for tuning in today. There was a lot of things going on today. Some ups, some downs, some controversial topics, as there always is, seems to be in these days of baseball. But let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. Don't forget to rate and review on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. It's greatly appreciated. Gets the podcast out there to all baseball lovers like us. And with that being said, I'll catch you guys in the next one. Thanks.